Hello, BookTube. I have a little comic book extra for you for the 4 or 5 of you who watch my comic book content. And for this comic book extra, we are taking a time travel backward to the year 1980. The year 1980, 24 full years before I was born. Uh, Marvel Comics and DC Comics are responding in two different ways to the fact that their ideologically infiltrated, propagandistic, stupid, trash weekly comics are not bought by anyone. Uh, in two ways. They're responding to that in two ways. One way that they're responding to the core audience of comic book fans wholeheartedly and pointedly rejecting the political junk that they're injecting into the comics is to double down on that. One of the ways that they're responding to the collapse of their industry is to hurry that collapse along by making unreadable comics. But another way that maybe those activists themselves, but that the company is responding, is to reprint more old issues. Reprint the issues from a time when people did read these comics and did enjoy them. Facsimile editions. It's easy for me to predict that DC and Marvel will just do more of that. It's easy to foresee a time in a year or 2 years when half the comics that are coming out are facsimile editions of single older issues, only at current day prices, which is $5 an issue. That seems to me a no-brainer. If you were a comic book company and you were allowing, if you are the editorial board of a comic book company and you are allowing your writers and editors and artists to alienate fans and kill your industry so that your actual new monthly comics cannot sell, if you're allowing them to do that, it seems to me the only way that you can make up any kind of headway would be to also repackage older stuff and sell it at modern day prices. And Marvel and DC have been doing that, and I wanted to show you one of the latest fruits of that. This is a Marvel facsimile reprint of the Uncanny X-Men, number 130. Only you didn't see that price back in 1980, or you'd have plotzed all over this thing. That price was probably twice what I paid for my whole stack of comics in a week. That price was significant. Now, no. This is, I guess, something that Marvel wanted to do. Usually Marvel is far more mercantilistic about this than DC. Usually they only highlight an older issue like this if it's going to help them in some other endeavor. I haven't heard any rumors that they're doing a live action adaptation of the character Dazzler. That is the character Dazzler on the cover. I haven't heard any indication that they're doing that. I don't know why they would. And I also haven't heard any hints of some major reprint effort or even launching a new title. So I'm not 100% sure why somebody would pick this issue, especially since the issue after this seems like a more likely candidate. But they did, and this is a facsimile reprint, so you not only get the artwork, you also get just everything. Look at this 2-page spread for all of these original model sets for Star Wars. You get in-house ads to advertise Marvel Comics, including, might as well get the worst of it over with right away, including 2 in-house ads for ROM Space Knight. He's in here twice. But also, you get teen posters from Popstar and Teen Beat. There is Susan Anton and Scott Baio in his bell-bottom jeans. You see all these other people. One person, it's mentioned, there's a little fine print down here. It mentions that one person is not listed, and that is Sean Cassidy. That's when you know that times they are a-changin', when Sean Cassidy is not pictured and Scott Baio is. You get all sorts of stuff like that, including ads that not only couldn't run in a comic book today, but that would get someone fired and personally threatened, and their children personally threatened, because we live in the end times. And that's this, an ad for a gun. Sure, it's a toy gun, but so what? That would get someone killed. Not the gun, but the ad would get someone killed. But this is at what is widely regarded as the absolute high point of the X-Men. This is in the middle of the John Byrne and Chris Claremont run on the title that fans look back on this with reverence. At the time that this issue came out in 1980, it was a pretty rough year for Marvel. Thor was in a terrible, terrible place. The Fantastic Four was in a terrible, boring, derivative place. Iron Man, the Micronauts was publishing, but the marquee artist at this time had already left, and the artwork wasn't all that good for anybody that replaced it. Marvel had Conan the Barbarian and Savage Sword of Conan, and both of those were reliably good. But when this issue came out, the only other real standout highlight that month was also an X-Men title, an X-Men annual, an extra long thing where the artwork was by George Perez and featured Archon the Invincible. And that was incredible. That's an incredible issue. And also a very interesting issue for one little detail about that I've mentioned a couple of times before. I don't know if I've mentioned on this channel. I've written about it. I should say that because there's nothing that I haven't written about. The X-Men's leader is Scott Summers, Cyclops. He is a mutant whose eyes are constantly firing unbelievable blasts of crimson energy beams. He can't control them. It's not like he's looking at you normally and then he decides, oh, I'm going to activate my force beams, like, for instance, Superman's heat vision. They're not under his control. It's a classic Stan Lee creation where there's a downside to almost every superpower. And so he controls them with these a ruby quartz visor. For some reason or other, ruby quartz isn't affected by his energy beams. So he's able to, if he wears a ruby quartz visor or ruby quartz glasses, then his beams are contained somehow. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Unless ruby quartz neutralizes his eye beams, then it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And we're not told that it does. We're only told that his eye beams don't affect it. But if you have your eyes open and blasts of unstoppable energy are coming out of them and hitting your eyeglasses, they're just going to blast your eyeglasses off your head. They're going to blast the visor off your head, maybe with your ears along with it. They're not just going to stop happening. But anyway, Scott Summers is the leader of the X-Men. And this is a time period in which the team is, I think the best way to put it would be Chris Claremont is trying to grow up the story that Stan Lee gave us originally. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby with the X-Men 20 years before this, 30 years before this. The X-Men are a team of mutants. They are people who are born with superpowers, or their superpowers develop at puberty, and they become mutants. They're totally unpredictable. There isn't any kind of a class or a phylum or a genus of them. Each one has a different kind of superpower, and they are hated and feared by humanity. Calls them racial slurs and wants them penned in cages or exterminated. And Stan Lee took on that social element of this concept immediately, right from the beginning. And a lot of writers have done a really good job on it. Not recently, of course, not recently. In Marvel continuity recently, the X-Men have become segregationist racists. They're almost all wearing a t-shirt that I noticed first in the 1990s. Magneto was right. Doesn't make any sense, but nothing about modern grievance politics comics makes any sense. But at the time, the X-Men were a team of adventurers who did not have the positive, glowing PR of a team like the Avengers or the Fantastic Four. And when this issue was reprinted, we're in the middle of a storyline. The X-Men, Professor X, who's bald and in a wheelchair, is a very powerful telepath. And there's Scott Summers, Cyclops, who has his eye beams. There's Jean Grey, formerly Marvel Girl. In this context, she is Phoenix. She has Marvel Girl's combination of telepathy and telekinesis, but at vastly increased levels. She resurrects herself from the dead in an earlier issue. And in this point, she's just on the team. She's Scott's lover. She's an original founding member of the X-Men. She's just on the team, but she is just alpha class powerful. And I imagine that when this issue was written, Claremont already knew what he wanted to do about that storyline. But right now, there's just a little bit of an awkwardness on the team because you've got all these people on the team, and then you've got someone who's Thor level powerful and doesn't need any of them to do anything. And in this issue, they are joined by Kurt Wagner, Nightcrawler, blue-skinned teleporter with a prehensile tail, looks like a demon, but he isn't. He's a sweetheart. The rest of the team is Colossus, a Russian young man who at will can transform into organic steel, super strong. You've probably seen him from the Deadpool movies if you don't know the comics. And Aurora Monroe, Storm, who is able to manipulate the weather. And also a little character called Wolverine, who has unbreakable adamantium claws that he can pop out of his knuckles, and he has an adamantium-laced skeleton which makes him almost invulnerable to harm, and an accelerated healing factor, so that even if you hurt him, he's gonna heal up right away in minutes instead of weeks or months. At this point in the X-Men run, on the new X-Men, he was popular. And the final panel of the issue after this one, immediately after this one, so 131, shot Wolverine to stratospheric popularity. That one panel did. But he's still popular in this issue. He's barely in this at all. Because in this storyline, Cerebro, the computer that Professor X developed in order to detect mutants in the world, has detected 2 new mutant signatures. One in Chicago and one in New York. So the team splits up. Professor X and Colossus and Wolverine and Storm go to Chicago to hunt down that signature, and Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Nightcrawler go to New York to hunt down the other signature. Now, what we get a very good recap sequence here. Let me show you. John Byrne does the artwork here, and he's really, really good. I'm going to show you. He gives us a full page recap of the stuff that we've missed, where an evil telepath named Emma Frost mentally incapacitates the team that goes to Chicago. So they are her captives. I'll show you. There's a panel here where we see that she has them in neural inhibitor cages. Professor X is unconscious. You can't risk him being awake. He's the most powerful telepath in the world. Easily the most dangerous person in this room. So he has to be just kept unconscious. And the other X-Men, they don't have their costumes on. They are stripped of their clothing. And they are in these neural inhibitor cages that stop their powers from being effective. But the other part of the team doesn't know that. Our team, Phoenix, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler, don't know that. They don't know the rest of the team has been defeated. So they're in New York, and they're tracking down the signature of this other mutant. And as you can see here, I'll show you, Scott Summers is tracking this down with a portable version of Cerebro. Cerebro is a gigantic room-sized computer. But here we have a visual so you can see Scott is using a smaller version on his watch. And that version tells him that the headlining event, a singer named Dazzler, is the mutant they're looking for. But there is another mutant who's involved here. We don't know that. We're not sure how important this mutant is going to be. But in Chicago, there's a young girl named Kitty Pryde who is a mutant. She's not 100% sure about that yet, and she's not part of the X-Men. They barely know she exists. But she knows they exist, and she has the ability to phase through solid objects. And here we have her as just a young teenage girl in bell bottoms, just a young teenage girl. She knows that the X-Men are the good guys, and she knows that anybody who's torturing them and caging them is the bad guys, but she doesn't know what to do about it. She approaches one of the cages stealthily, and the X-Men Storm apparently has a slip with a phone number. The phone number of the other part of the team is on her, part of her clothing that wasn't taken from her. She hands that slip, that phone number, to Kitty. There's no bumping phones. There's no cell phones. She hands that to Kitty Pryde, who runs by diving into the floor. She escapes her captors that way, by diving into the floor. So word has got out now, and we will just see if it gets to our heroes in time. Because our heroes pull up in New York. Look at that artwork. God help us. Just lovely. They pull up in New York in order to visit a seedy discotheque where the Scott Summers' cerebral watch is telling him this mutant is going to be. We get a recap of their mission. So lots and lots, the classic signature Chris Claremont blocks of dialogue. But we also very candidly get summaries of who they are from these guys, the bad guys, who give us a rundown of Scott Summers and his powers, Jean Grey and her powers, Nightcrawler and his powers. And they work for an organization called the Hellfire Club, which is making its debut in these issues. The Hellfire Club, on the surface, is a well-to-do gentleman's club in New York. But really, it's a front for a gigantic criminal enterprise, and, as we will see, the leaders of the Hellfire Club are all superpowered beings themselves, and pure evil. And these guys in the van are staking out our heroes in order to take them out the same way the guys in Chicago took out the other team, or would have, if they hadn't lost to the other team. It was Emma Frost, the telepath, who took them out. But these guys are all in position. Scott Summers and Jean Grey leave Nightcrawler outside because he looks like a little demon. He would draw attention to them in the club. They look normal. So they go in alone, and Nightcrawler stays outside. And the guys in the van are in touch with Sebastian Shaw, who is the leader of the Hellfire Club back in New York. And they tell him, we're ready. We're ready to go whenever you say the word. And notice all the details in here that Byrne gets exactly right. Notice he can't see Sebastian Shaw. We, on the very next panel, we see that Shaw can see him clearly. But Shaw does not allow him to see what his employer actually looks like. But he does give him a pat on the back. Again, this is good writing on Claremont's part. He says, "Excellent, Rhodey. The Hellfire Club is proud of you." And we're going to see, at the end of the episode, when Rhodey and his crew fail, the Hellfire Club just executes them. It's the kind of thing that makes rereading these issues so enjoyable, because they are layered and layered. And one member of the Hellfire Club that is bantering with Sebastian Shaw is a guy named Jason Weingart. That's what he looks like. A dashing, debonair guy with vaguely 19th century mutton chop sideburns. He tells Shaw that he is slowly warping the mind of Jean Grey. And we've seen him before. She keeps having prolonged visions of a past life with this guy that she knows she didn't experience, and she can't explain it. She doesn't really go into detail to the other X-Men. She bloody well should, but she doesn't. And it happens again in this issue, because they go to this discotheque. You're going to have to Google that. You young people are going to have to Google that. She goes to this discotheque. Jason Weingart is there. He touches her, and suddenly they're transformed. They're transported to ages past, to 100 years ago. And he wants to marry her. This is a vision of them marrying, and of him revealing her as the Black Queen. And he kisses her, and she's into it. Notice the priest is Sebastian Shaw. So we know this is just thoroughly evil, but she'd never seen Sebastian Shaw before, and she's not doing her due diligence with this guy. He's hitting the romance section of her brain. They passionately kiss in the vision, and they are passionately kissing in the discotheque. And she tries to explain to Scott Summers, but they get interrupted by Dazzler, who is warping the air around her into an incredible pyrotechnic show. And she's not doing it with pyrotechnic equipment. Pretty easily, we see that is her mutant ability. And right as Scott Summers is noticing that she must be the mutant they're looking for, the phone in the Rolls Royce that the three of them rolled up to this club with rings. There's a phone in the car. Nightcrawler goes to answer it, and it's Kitty Pryde, who has found a phone somewhere. She's found a phone, and she says, "Hello? Is this the X-Men? I'm Kitty Pryde. Aurora told me to call this number. She and her friend, Professor Xavier, have been captured. They need you guys to come rescue them, and me too, and please hurry. They're searching all over for me. I gotta go." And Nightcrawler says, "Wait, slow down, girl. I need details. Who captured the X-Men, and where are they being held?" And before she can answer, a guy in an armored suit. Again, notice the job that Byrne does. We're concentrating on this, but we can see what he can't, which is that this armored mercenary is going to rip the door off the car and go looking for him. Nightcrawler instinctively teleports to 30 feet away from the guy. But it doesn't matter because this, oh God, there's Rom again. This suit is equipped with all sorts of technology to help. It disorients Nightcrawler so he can't transport again. And it's also got suctions so that it can walk up the side of the building. It's an alarm. It lets Jean Grey and Scott Summers know that there's a danger here, that there's more going on here than just finding a mutant. Sure enough, 2 more of these mercenaries burst through the skylight. They assume their costumes. Dazzler's set is interrupted, and the 2 of them are almost immediately neutralized. The guy uses a sensory deprivation thing to go at Phoenix and momentarily discombobulate her. And this guy shoots a blob of ruby quartz over Cyclops' face. Cyclops can control the ruby quartz in his visor, but he can't control this. It's just wrapped around his head, and it prevents him from using his abilities. But Dazzler is cheesed off because her show has been ruined. See that? This wonderful imagery that Byrne does. Notice what he's doing here. This is not done. This is done with coloring and the absence of special effects rather than anything demonstrative that he's doing. And it works really well. We're told, she says, Chuckles, I had one dynamite debut going till you jokers crashed the gate. Now it's ruined. Again, some of you will need to, most of you I would imagine, will need to Google what dynamite means. She's not saying dynamite. She's saying dynamite. And that was a signature thing from TV of the era, one particular character. We're told light, in all its infinite variety, bursts around the hapless man, instantly flooding his eyes, his mind, his soul. His brain can't cope with the sensory overload. It short-circuits and turns itself completely off. So she incapacitates one of these guys just by pointing at him. Oh, God. There he is again. Okay, all right. So we're just going to try and blot that out. And because it's a Chris Claremont issue, we get lots of agonizing. Lots and lots of expository agonizing. She says, he's catatonic. I didn't mean to dazzle him so hard. I've never intentionally used my powers to hurt anyone before. I didn't know. And then the other armored mercenary shoots at her. Says you're lucky that the boss wants you alive, otherwise I would just fry you instead of trying to incapacitate you. But Dazzler knocked out the guy who was incapacitating Phoenix, which means she's back in the game, and this is a foregone conclusion, although she doesn't do it. It's Scott Summers. She takes the glop off his face, and he uses his force beams to knock out these 2. Then there's the one who's dealing with Nightcrawler, and Phoenix deals with him immediately. And then we are told... things are worse. Nightcrawler says to Cyclops, things are worse than you think, Cyclops. The X-Men in Chicago have also been attacked, and they and Professor X have been captured. And then the caption says, quickly, Nightcrawler tells Cyclops what Kitty Pryde had told him. But as we have seen, Kitty Pryde told him nothing. Absolutely nothing. He doesn't even know her name. Has no idea where she's calling from. Nothing like that. I guess we could stretch a point, maybe, and say that Phoenix might have got some of this information from one of these mercenaries, although I think that's a stretch as well, because we've seen that Sebastian Shaw does not include them in his confidence. He won't even let them see his face. But before they can go and deal with that, Scott Summers has to perform the mission that he came here for, which is to explain to Dazzler what's going on. She says, call me Dazzler, darling. That's my name. That's what I do. Dazzle people. We can assume here that this is stage makeup. I don't know if that was John Byrne's or Chris Claremont's original conception of this character, because in the next issue, when Scott Summers and Jean Grey and Nightcrawler and Dazzler are looking for Kitty Pryde, Scott Summers says Jean should go in and look for her because of all of us, she's the most normal looking. That would be a pretty bad insult to Dazzler unless she can't take this off. Unless that's what she looks like all the time. I don't know if that was ever Chris Claremont's original intention. But Scott Summers says, have you ever wondered where your light powers come from? And she says, nope. Which is certainly not true, no matter what, even if she's an imbecile. That is certainly not true. She would certainly have wondered. I think what he should have said is, do you know where they come from? She would certainly have wondered. But he tells her, You're a mutant, Dazzler. You have powers and abilities that set you apart from the rest of humanity. And as you've just seen, there are people who will stop at nothing to capture or kill you. Which is very similar to the, intentionally similar, to the spiel that Professor X gives to new mutant recruits to his team. He repeats a variation on that to half the members of the new, all different Uncanny X-Men just a year ago from this issue. She agrees to go with them, and they get out of the discotheque just as it blows up. The Hellfire Club just blows the place up with everyone inside. I was planning to have Jean telepathically interrogate one of those goons, said Cyclops, which means she didn't learn anything about Chicago from any of these goons. Not that they would have known it. It's just, we're stretching a point here. I guess their masters wanted to make sure I couldn't. Nice people. And they're driving off. And as they're driving off, they see that Jason Weingard, this guy on the discotheque, everybody in the disco is dead. Other than Jason Weingard. He made it outside. He's standing outside on the street watching them. And they drive by because I guess they're in a real hurry. Notice another beautiful detail in John Byrne's artwork. He remembers that the door is gone. That the door was torn off the car. And Cyclops briefly notes that his silhouette against the wall is different from what he looks like. This looks different from that. It doesn't look like the man's silhouette at all. A couple of eagle-eyed viewers back in 1980. I know of one in particular, but there are plenty of others. A couple of viewers noticed this discrepancy and recognized that silhouette and knew immediately who this character really was. But we're told that Scott Summers notices it, but that he has way too much on his mind. So they drive off to ominous background laughter. They drive off to save their teammates. And it's all just wonderfully done. The artwork here is just wonderfully done. Even down to the little detail of the light bulbs in illuminating the X-Men logo. The disco light bulbs. 1980 was the year that we had a hangover from the 1970s. The 1970s were not only indescribable, but inexplicable. There's no way for anybody who lived through them to explain them to anybody who didn't. And they were so powerful that they had a hangover. So, even though Saturday Night Fever came out in 1977, that was the height of the disco mania, it was still more or less going strong, keep on trucking in 1980. It was about to come to an abrupt end. 1980 ended all of that. But for a while, we had a little bit of a hangover. And that's what this issue is. This issue introduces Dazzler. A new mutant. In this issue, both Dazzler and Kitty Pryde are referred to not as new mutants, but as neo-mutants. But I think that was just Chris Claremont's way of saying that these were previously unknown mutants. Kitty Pryde and Dazzler. But readers can assume that Emma Frost, the telepath, the evil telepath, is also a new mutant. She doesn't appear to be registering on Scott Summers' little handheld Cerebro. But keep in mind, 1980, the idea that you could take a room-sized computer and reduce it to the size of a wristwatch, that was pretty forward thinking on Chris Claremont's part. I'm not so 100% sure about the character of Dazzler. I'm not 100% sure about the idea of her powers. Like, for instance, we are told that she transmutes sound all around her into pyrotechnic light shows. If that's true, wouldn't she be muted? Wouldn't everything be muted? Wouldn't she be drawing that sound to transmute it or whatnot? I don't know how that would work anyway. And the one thing that I thought when I bought this issue originally, I thought, okay, you got the disco, you got the seedy environment, you got the John Byrne makes sure to add in pen portraits of people that he actually knows. You've got the seedy Lower East Side vibe and all that. The only thing that's missing from this collection of stereotypes is roller coasters, roller skates. And sure enough, in the next issue, somehow, Dazzler now has a pair of roller skates, but not in this issue. I don't think she has them in this issue. No, she's just a normal person. She's just a normal person. As the X-Men head out, and she goes with them because she really doesn't think that she has a choice. And they will go on to try to rescue their colleagues and deal with the Hellfire Club. So this was a facsimile edition that was reprinted this week. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun to go through this. It really did enhance. I often maybe even overlooked the artist John Byrne because he's been a towering figure for so long. He's done so much great work. I of course hate what he did to Superman, but he's done so much great work for so long with all the companies you can imagine that it takes getting an issue like this, as opposed to just thumbing through a whole stream of them on digitally, it takes getting an issue like this and looking at it again for the first time in 40 years to really remind myself what a great job he was doing here. But every little detail is just wonderfully done and consistent. If a character gets a cut on their upper left arm, you can be sure it will be there in 10 panels. So that is our 1980 flashback, one of many today, to the X-Men issue that was probably the highlight of this month. I think I can safely say that. It was probably the highlight of this month. This or the X-Men Annual. I can't remember if the Annual came out at the exact same time as this. The X-Men Annual that I'm talking about had not only George Perez artwork, which is always a treat, it was amazingly good, but it also had a Gil Kane cover. So what's not to like? But it was the X-Men's whole month. It was there to lose. There was nobody else. Of course, DC comics were terrific this month, but we're dealing with this one for now. So there you go, a little bit of a comics extra for you, for all you clamoring for comics content. But I'll wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.